Hello everybody, the music fan is back bringing smiles to the faces, knowledge to the people, and most importantly, music to the masses. And I'm back with another Are You In? Now this is the second of a themed two-parter. The theme here is albums that exceeded my expectations and also albums that are really heartbreaking. Without further ado, we're taking a look at the newest Korn album entitled The Nothing. Now, Korn is a new metal, alt-metal band from Bakersfield, California. Members including Jonathan Davis on lead vocals, bagpipes, and programming, James "Monkey" Schaefer on guitars and backing vocals, Reginald "Fieldy" Reivew on bass guitar, Brian "Head" Welsh on guitars and vocals, and Ray Luzier on drums and percussion. Previous albums include Korn in 1994, Life is Peachy in 96, Follow the Leader in 98, Issues in 99, Untouchables in 2002, Take a Look in the Mirror in 2003, See You on the Other Side in 2005, Untitled Album in 2007, Korn 3 Remember Who You Are in 2010, The Path of Totality in 2011, The Paradigm Shift in 2013, and The Serenity of Suffering in 2016. Now, Korn is an interesting band to me. I really enjoy a lot of their earlier stuff. They were one of the pioneering bands of nu metal, having a really heavy sound incorporating these really down-tuned guitars with really interesting and tense and disturbing vocals from Jonathan Davis, having also a little bit of electronics there as well, but mostly just having a very disturbing sound. Follow the Leader is definitely their crowning achievement. Songs like Freak on a Leash are on there, but throughout the years they've had a pretty solid catalog with songs like Falling Away From Me to even stuff later in the 2000s with Coming Undone. I like a lot of their earlier stuff because it's rawer, it has more energy, it hits harder to me. But as the years go on, they seem to have fallen into more of a atmospheric and subdued sound. Even though it's heavy in a different way. And I was always turned off by it. I always saw other people really enjoying it and giving it rave reviews, but it never really sat well with me. For a while now, I haven't been a huge Korn fan. They've also been really active throughout the 2010s, which to me is pretty crazy for a band like this. Having now 5 albums, Remember Who You Are, Path to Totality, The Paradigm Shift, and The Serenity of Suffering. None of these really stand out to me. I guess The Path of Totality is the only one that does, only because it was a collaboration with Skrillex, making for a more current approach to a tried and true genre. None of these really stand out to me, even though I've seen other people rave over it. That being said, I didn't really have any expectations at all when it came to this album. When I didn't know the background of it, I was just like, okay, cool, it's a Korn album. I listened to the first single, You'll Never Find Me, which was decent, but didn't really stand out. And I was like, okay, whatever, I'll see what happens when it happens. But then I started reading the background of this album. I started listening to other album reviews about this album and started understanding the full entire picture. And when I got the full entire picture, it made me understand where this album is coming from, and it made me want to hear what they have put out. Now, for those of you who don't know, over the last few years, Jonathan Davis lost his mother, but also his wife. He lost his wife due to an overdose. She had had drug abuse problems, and it finally caught up with her. Jonathan Davis has been going through, of course, a lot. And anytime that he was in a bad state or was not in the best frames of mind, he would go into a closet and literally record everything and anything that came to mind. And this album, The Nothing, is what came from that. The Nothing is a reference to a place in the never-ending story filled with just darkness, and this definitely feels dark. And that's what you're going to get through most of this album. This album starts with The End Begins, which has Jonathan Davis playing bagpipes, something that we haven't heard in a very long time from this band. It feels like a funeral dirge. Eventually drums come in more, and the rest of the band comes in more, feeling heavier and feeling rawer. Eventually you hear Davis like singing other parts and slowly coming undone. There's a little bit of crying in there as well, and it's just absolutely heartbreaking, and you know what you have in store. You also have Davis chanting about "They're coming for me," and it's like it's finally coming out, and basically it's him personifying his thoughts into beings and being like, now you're gone and no one's here to keep me in check, so now this is going to happen. Cold oh my god, is so heavy. Maybe the heaviest song I've heard from them ever. It honestly doesn't even feel like a Korn song. Some of the screams on here and guttural sounds remind me more of a Slipknot song than a Korn song. It just is so percussive and so soul crushing. The melody is fine and it's very playful at times. It's talking about Davis's thoughts, find the right time to attack him with depressive and sometimes suicidal thoughts. And it honestly seems like you have two perspectives here. Him and then his thoughts, and his thoughts are even a personification, this evil, this horrible things. And just the guttural sound feels like at that point you have those demons coming for you, and it's absolutely scary. The chorus, really solid, but what sets this song apart from the rest of the album is just the raw energy. A lot of this album reminds me more of earlier Korn, more rhythmic, more heavy, more raw. And you're going to get a lot on this album with You'll Never Find Me, The Darkness is Revealing. Two of the better songs on the album, both having some great raw energy. The melody on The Darkness is Revealing is one of the best on the album, and it's really playful against the drums timing, which also has some of the best drumming on the album so far. The guitar is really crunchy and dissonant, and the chorus also has some great energy, with the drums taking a little bit more of a marching tone to it. It gets really crazy on the bridge as well. Davis basically loses it at the end of the song, which he gets really emotional in a lot of these breakdowns. You'll Never Find Me is probably the most reminiscent of something you've heard from Korn before. It does still have a lot of really good raw energy, and the chorus has a great chord progression, and I love how the melody plays with that chord progression. And once you get to Davis screaming, "I'm lost, you'll never find me," just really raw, really emotional throughout the whole entire song. On the first half of the album, Idiosyncrasy, to me, is the first misstep. I'm going to say a quick word before I start getting into criticisms. I get it. This is a healing process for Davis, and I'm not necessarily bashing any song. I am only saying my opinion because as a reviewer, I have to. I'm not faulting him for any misstep on this album. This is how he wanted to approach this album to help him heal and to help grief. I can only say it from my sensibilities in order to give you an idea of what I think is great and what I think is not. So, going along, Idiosyncrasy has a great chorus that has a nice bounce to it, but the verse itself is one of those that goes back to some of the newer sounds with Korn. The less heavy, the less rhythmic, more legato, and heavy in a different way that I'm just not a huge fan of. I don't think that Davis is necessarily the best singer legato. Staccato, he's fantastic, but legato, I don't think he has that. It's just the tone of his voice. But as the song goes on, it gets batshit crazy. Literally screaming to God that God is making fun of him for his pain. There's a very poignant line of, "You walk a thin line, changing the hurt without healing mine." It's him at his most frustrated because he's talking to God as in, why are you hurting me this way? Why do you have to hurt me when you've already hurt me over the years? Now you're just changing the hurt, and now it's even more painful. Absolutely intense. It makes up, again, for a hugely intense first half. The Seduction of Indulgence kind of wraps up that first half, feeling a little bit more like a interlude, and it's a really creepy one, very Halloweenish. There's some weird melodies on the first half of the song, but once you get to the descriptive of like raping me, clawing me, all these things, it gets really disturbing. It makes for a really crazy interlude as you're going through the thoughts of what is going on to Davis. And in a weird way, this is a really interesting halfway point because throughout the first half, it seems like Davis is trying to be denying this depression because he doesn't want to feel this. Now he's kind of going to the point where he's letting it in. And yeah, it's going to hurt, but he's letting it in. He's trying to find some sort of clarity from there. Rounding out the better songs of the album, you have Finally Free and Can You Hear Me? Finally Free mixes new and old Korn. The verse feels a little bit like new Korn with a little bit of the more slow, heavier stuff. But the pre-chorus has a nice calm response, and the chorus is really solid. A lot of great primal energy in the bridge. Though it doesn't stand as much out as some of the other breakdowns on this album, still a really solid song from the get-go. Can You Hear Me is also slower and heavier. It does a nice soft verse, heavy chorus. And honestly, it's a solid arrangement that doesn't really do many flashy things, but does enough to stand out. I really enjoy the post-chorus part where the "I will never be the same again," especially when it gets to "I will never be the same again." The playful nature, really, really solid chorus. The "Can you hear me? 'Cause I'm lost." A short song that does enough to stand out. However, after that, the album starts to take a turn for the worst. Gravity Discomfort is the best one of those. I enjoy the call and response electronic parts at the beginning. The melody is really solid, especially in the second half. A solid song with an alright breakdown, but it doesn't stand out on this album compared to other songs. And then the Ringmaster, Harder, and This Loss all have nice things going for them that get broken by some questionable decisions. The Ringmaster has this interesting vibe, almost feeling like very comical at points, but I don't understand what is up with the vocals on here. It's just really weird. This dubbed vocals don't really work. I understand it's trying to be the voice of the Ringmaster of his thoughts. It just doesn't really stand out. The chorus is decent, but the breakdown feels like a kid rock song. It's just really cliche, and I don't understand what's going on here. The beatboxing, though, is a nice addition, but I do feel like the bridge kind of panders to older fans with the from like Freak on a Leash, making for one of the weaker songs. Harder is a decent song that suffers from a weak melody. The chorus is alright with these harder and harder and harder parts, adding a nice touch, and the breakdown is absolutely insane with a lot of really dissonant parts and just feeling crazy, combined with those constant streams. The drum freakout is really cool with the vocals that Davis adds to add a little bit more craziness to this. This one on the latter half feels the rawest, but it's a pretty weak melody on the whole to me. This Loss is also decent, but again, like Gravity Discomfort, it's just not memorable. Verses and chorus do enough to stand out, but the great gets dragged down by a pretty cheesy bridge section. All in all, the second half of the album does suffer from some weaker material. What started great ends a little bit poorly, though the last song does make up for it. Surrender to the Failure is absolutely heartbreaking. It's a 2-minute song that's very open and pretty stripped down for a Korn song. It feels kind of like the partner song to the beginning of the end. It feels like those two tie in very well. This song where he finally, at least accepting his wife's death a little bit more, even though he wishes she was still there. It's absolutely gut-wrenching. The crying of him saying, "I failed," at the end, so hard to hear. It makes for a really touching ending. Again, I'm not exactly sure if he's fine. This is a little bit ambiguous, but you hope that he is. This definitely was a hard album for him to write, and this band has done moody and sad before, but this is truly painful in a lot of ways. So, yes, even though some of the weaker songs in the album are at the end, you have to listen to the whole thing. I can't stress that enough. To start this journey, you have to finish it, because he's doing the same thing. He's starting this road to recovery, and it takes time. It must be even more painful. I don't know if he's still sober, but to have been sober and to see your loved one dealing with these issues that you yourself have been able to get through, and to see them to succumb to that addiction and wishing you could have been there more. I can't even imagine what he's dealing with. The only thing I can say, and I think that's what Davis would want, is for you to listen through this, to understand his pain and empathize. So I gotta say, listen to the full album. It's rough around the edges at points, but it's also really raw and really emotional, and hits some of what made Korn great back in the day. It's even hard for me to like give it a grade or anything like that. This is an album that needs to be listened to because of the story, because of what has gone on, the background behind it, and maybe you won't enjoy all of it. I honestly did not, but it's a short enough album that you should listen to the whole entire thing. There's some great songs to come back to on this album. Some really emotional, really raw and heavy songs that do stand out on their discography. Give it a chance. If you're a Korn fan, I think you will be at least proud of what he put out. That is my time. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know if you'll ever hate this album and your reasons why. Let me know other albums in 2019 you'd like me to review. Share this with your friends, and most importantly, subscribe to my channel. That way, I know that you enjoy what I'm doing and want to see this channel become bigger and better for the future. I'll be back with a couple more RU Ins. Until then, this is Music Fan. I'm signing off.